Benjamin Franklin said, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." Today, invest in your knowledge of Spanish for the stock market. Bienvenidos. Welcome to Business Spanish. The Business Spanish Podcast will help you develop your skills as a bilingual professional in negotiation and communication, whether you're in the boardroom or the break room. I'm your host, Michelle, and I invite you to join us in each episode as we explore the Spanish of different industries, business disciplines, and cultures. ¿Listos? Manos a la obra. ¡Feliz Año Nuevo! Happy New Year a nuestros escuchas. I hope you had a very relaxing and joyful holiday season, and you have renewed vigor to improve your business Spanish in 2023. I'm excited to begin this new year with listeners in now 59 countries on 6 continents around the world. Please continue to share this podcast with your colleagues and your networks and help us grow. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a good review. Finally, please send us your comments and your ideas at BusinessSpanishPodcast@gmail.com. I was inspired to present today's episode during a recent visit to New York City, and in particular, a stroll down Wall Street past the New York Stock Exchange. You know, we just can't talk about business without some understanding of the global financial markets. Now, today we're going to analyze some texts relating to the stock market. First, I will read through the passage. Then we'll define some of the key vocabulary in the texts. And finally, we will reread that passage and provide the English translation. If some of the terms we do not define are new to you, please go back and listen to previous episodes of this podcast. We continue to learn new terms and build on previous lessons throughout this podcast series. Also, please note, this lesson is not intended to give investment advice, nor to give detailed explanation about how financial markets work. Instead, it seeks to help you learn important Spanish terms related to the stock market. Así que, empecemos. Well, we're going to start with a few statements in Spanish. Listen closely, and then we'll go back and review the vocabulary and translate them. El mercado de valores opera como cualquier otro mercado en el que se negocian bienes, solo que en este caso se trata de instrumentos financieros. La demanda y la oferta de estos instrumentos se encuentran en este lugar de intercambio llamado mercado de valores, en el que la compra y venta se pueden realizar a través de intermediarios, ya sea en una bolsa o fuera de ella, o mediante una negociación directa entre las partes interesadas. Okay, now we're going to go back to that first statement, and we hear this term, el mercado de valores. In our last episode, we explained that los valores refer to financial securities. Of course, this word valor can also mean value, but when we're talking about financial markets, it refers to securities. So, el mercado de valores is the securities market or the financial market. Negociar, of course, is to negotiate, and los bienes, in this case, are goods or assets. Los instrumentos financieros is just like it sounds, financial instruments. La demanda is our economic term for demand, and la oferta is supply. El intercambio is exchange. El intermediario is intermediary. La bolsa, of course, many of you understand it as purse or bag, but in this case, la bolsa de valores, or simply la bolsa, refers to the stock exchange or securities exchange. And sometimes it's even understood to mean the stock market in general. So let's take another look at the text and translate it into English. El mercado de valores opera como cualquier otro mercado. So the stock market or the securities market operates like any other market, en el que se negocian bienes, in which goods are negotiated, in other words, bought and sold, solo que en este caso se trata de instrumentos financieros. Only that in this case, those goods are financial instruments. La demanda y la oferta de estos instrumentos se encuentran en este lugar. The supply and demand of these instruments can be found in this place, en este lugar de intercambio llamado mercado de valores. In this place of exchange, which is called the securities market, en el que la compra y venta se pueden realizar a través de intermediarios, where buying and selling can be carried out by intermediaries, ya sea en una bolsa o fuera de ella, either inside or outside of the stock exchange. So again, we're seeing that word bolsa mean the stock exchange, o mediante una negociación directa entre las partes interesadas, or by direct negotiation between interested parties. Muy bien. Now moving on, we're going to answer the question, ¿Qué son las bolsas de valores? And we already talked about it a little bit in the previous passage, but we're going to examine a couple more sentences that describe la bolsa de valores. Las bolsas de valores son parte del mercado de valores, que es el lugar donde los inversionistas compran y venden acciones de empresas. Este mercado es un conjunto de acciones de varias empresas que se pueden comprar y vender y a menudo sirve como indicador de la salud de la economía. So again, we have this term, la bolsa de valores, which we previously defined to mean the stock exchange, and sometimes it also refers to the general stock market. El inversionista or la inversionista is investor. However, in some parts of the Spanish-speaking world, instead of inversionista, you will hear el inversor or la inversora to mean investor. And likewise, we could take the same root of that word and get a verb, invertir. Invertir means to invest. La inversión is investment. La inversión. La acción. This may look like a familiar word because it means action, of course, but in a financial sense, la acción is a corporate share or stock, a company share or stock. El indicador is indicator, and of course, la economía means economy. So having reviewed those words, let's go back to our text and read it again and translate it into English. Las bolsas de valores son parte del mercado de valores. Stock exchanges are part of the stock market, que es el lugar donde los inversionistas compran y venden acciones de empresas, which is the place where investors buy and sell shares of companies. Este mercado es un conjunto de acciones de varias empresas. This market is a collection of shares of various companies que se pueden comprar y vender, that can be bought and sold, y a menudo sirve como indicador de la salud de la economía. and often it serves as an indicator of the health of the economy. Excelente, sigamos. Entonces, ¿qué son estas inversiones? What are these investments? When we're talking about the stock market, generally we are talking about variable income, or in other words, equities, which are the stocks or shares of a corporation. La renta variable es un tipo de inversión formada por todos aquellos activos financieros en los que la devolución del capital invertido y la rentabilidad de la inversión no están garantizadas ni son conocidas de antemano. Además, puede ocurrir que la rentabilidad sea negativa, pudiendo llegar incluso a perder el dinero invertido. Este tipo de inversión siempre implica un cierto grado de riesgo. So looking back over that passage, we have the following. La renta variable, as we briefly discussed earlier, means variable income. In other words, equities, stocks, shares of companies. La renta variable. El activo financiero is financial asset. So activo means asset. La rentabilidad is profitability or yield. La rentabilidad. La devolución means return or refund. El capital, in this case, means capital, as in the capital investment, the money that you invest. El riesgo always comes up when we're talking about the stock market. It means risk. El riesgo. So let's break down that passage and translate it into English. La renta variable es un tipo de inversión. Variable income is a type of investment formada por aquellos activos financieros made up of those financial assets en los que la devolución del capital invertido y la rentabilidad de la inversión, in which the return of the invested capital and the profitability of the investment no están garantizadas ni conocidas de antemano, are not guaranteed, nor are they known in advance. Además, puede ocurrir que la rentabilidad sea negativa. Furthermore, they could possibly yield a negative return, pudiendo llegar incluso a perder el dinero invertido. And the money invested could even be lost. Este tipo de inversión siempre implica un cierto grado de riesgo. This type of investment always involves a certain degree of risk. So again, la renta variable, those are the equities. Now we're going to talk a little bit about renta fija, fixed income, which really isn't part of the stock market because it's not a stock, but it is considered part of the financial securities market. La renta fija es un tipo de inversión formada por todos los activos financieros en los que el emisor está obligado a realizar pagos en una cantidad en un periodo de tiempo previamente establecidos. En la renta fija, el emisor garantiza la devolución del capital invertido y una cierta rentabilidad. O, dicho de otra manera, si adquirimos un instrumento de renta fija, conocemos los intereses o rentabilidad que nos van a pagar desde el momento en que compramos dicho instrumento. That was a mouthful. So let's look at some of the vocabulary in that passage that we haven't covered yet. La renta fija is fixed income. So we're talking about debt instruments such as bonds. And while it wasn't in the passage, debt is la deuda. La deuda. What are some of those debt instruments? Well, they're bonds. And so to say bond in Spanish is el bono, el bono. The text mentions el emisor. El emisor is issuer, like a bond issuer. Los intereses is interest. And while in English, interest is really a singular noun, it's typically a plural in Spanish. Los intereses. And we can't talk about los intereses without talking about the interest rate that applies to the interest earned. So the interest rate in Spanish is la tasa de interés. You may also hear el tipo de interés. La tasa or el tipo de interés is interest rate. So let's go back and translate that passage. La renta fija es un tipo de inversión formada por todos los activos financieros. So fixed income is a type of investment made up of those financial assets en los que el emisor está obligado a realizar pagos, in which the issuer is required to make payments en una cantidad y en un periodo de tiempo previamente establecidos, according to a previously determined amount and period of time. En la renta fija, el emisor garantiza la devolución del capital invertido. In fixed income, the issuer guarantees the return of the invested capital y una cierta rentabilidad, and a certain profitability. O, dicho de otra manera, si adquirimos un instrumento de renta fija, or in other words, if we acquire a fixed income instrument, conocemos los intereses o rentabilidad que nos van a pagar. We know the interest or profitability that will be paid desde el momento en que compramos dicho instrumento. From the moment we buy the instrument. Hola amigos! I hope you're enjoying this podcast and learning ways to improve your professional Spanish skills. Interested in one-on-one coaching? In addition to this podcast, I offer private and small group Spanish lessons online for beginner to intermediate speakers. For a limited time, your first session is free. For more details, leave a comment or email BusinessSpanishPodcast@gmail.com. See the show notes for more information. Si estás escuchando este podcast y quieres mejorar tu inglés, no esperes más. Ofrezco lecciones de inglés en línea y tu primera clase es gratis. Para obtener más detalles, deje un comentario o envíame un correo a BusinessSpanishPodcast@gmail.com. Ve la descripción de este episodio para más información. Great, so we have discussed a little bit about what is the stock market, the financial securities market. Now let's take a look at who are the participants in the stock market. ¿Quiénes son los actores en el mercado de valores? Los inversionistas, que son personas o sociedades, son demandantes que buscan los instrumentos financieros que les reporten la mayor rentabilidad posible, de acuerdo al riesgo que estén dispuestos a asumir. Los emisores son oferentes y requieren de capital para financiar sus proyectos. Para reunir estos recursos, pueden ofrecer valores como acciones, bonos, fondos mutuos, etc., a los inversionistas. Los intermediarios son operaciones que acercan a demandantes y oferentes, tales como intermediarios de valores, por ejemplo, agentes de valores, corredores de bolsa y bancos. También operaciones de intermediación, como las bolsas de valores y también el mercado extrabursátil y sociedades de apoyo. Los reguladores supervisan que las actividades y participantes del mercado de valores operen dentro del marco legal y demás normativa reglamentaria que les sea aplicable. So again, we're taking a look at the participants in the stock market in this passage. And we start with los inversionistas or inversores. Again, those are the investors. And we say here that they are demandantes. El demandante. El demandante can be a plaintiff if in a legal sense of the word, but in this case, we're talking about the consumer, the entity or the person that drives the demand. El demandante. Reportar in this passage means to yield a certain profitability. El oferente is the offerer, the person or the entity that does the offering. In other words, a bidder or supplier. Financiar means to finance or to fund. Financiar. El recurso is resource. El fondo mutuo is mutual fund. El fondo mutuo. El agente de valores is securities dealer or agent. Corredor de bolsa or la corredora de bolsa is stockbroker. Sometimes you may hear el corredor and other times you may hear el broker. El banco, as you all know, is bank. El mercado extrabursátil is the over-the-counter or off-exchange market. El mercado extrabursátil. La sociedad in this passage means a company or corporation. La sociedad. El regulador is another participant in the market, and it means regulator or regulatory agency. El regulador. El marco legal is legal framework. So let's go back and take another look at the participants in the stock market. Los inversionistas, personas o sociedades, son demandantes. Investors, individuals or corporations, are consumers or the people that drive demand. Que buscan los instrumentos financieros, that seek financial instruments que les reporten la mayor rentabilidad posible, that yield the highest possible return, de acuerdo al riesgo que estén dispuestos a asumir, according to the risk they are willing to assume. So that's our first participant, inversionistas. Another participant in the stock market are los emisores, which we previously defined as issuers. Los emisores son oferentes y requieren de capital para financiar sus proyectos. Issuers are suppliers, in other words, they drive the supply, and need capital to finance their projects. para reunir estos recursos pueden ofrecer valores como acciones, bonos, fondos mutuos, etc., a los inversionistas. To obtain these resources, they can offer securities such as stocks, bonds, mutual funds, etc., to investors. Otro participante en el mercado de valores son los intermediarios. Los intermediarios son operaciones que acercan a demandantes y oferentes. Intermediaries are operations that bring together the consumers and suppliers, the investors, in other words, and the issuers. Intermediarios de valores, como agentes de valores, corredores de bolsa, y bancos. So some of those are securities intermediaries, such as securities dealers, brokers, and banks. Operaciones de intermediación, como bolsas de valores y el mercado extrabursátil. So brokerage operations, such as stock exchanges and the off-exchange market. Y sociedades de apoyo, and supporting institutions. Finally, we have the participants that are los reguladores. Los reguladores supervisan que las actividades y participantes del mercado de valores. The regulators supervise the activities and participants of the securities market. Operen dentro del marco legal y demás normativa reglamentaria que les sea aplicable, making sure they operate within legal frameworks and other applicable regulations. Now we're just going to give a very simple 4-step explanation of how does the stock market work. ¿Cómo funciona? Número 1. Una empresa decide hacerse pública y emitir acciones en la bolsa. O sea, hace una oferta pública inicial. Número 2. Los inversionistas compran las acciones y se convierten en propietarios de una parte de la empresa. Número 3. La empresa obtiene el capital y podrá crecer y cumplir sus metas operativas y financieras. Y número 4. Los inversionistas podrán sacar provecho de las acciones de las siguientes maneras. La primera es ganar dividendos otorgados por la empresa y la segunda es negociar las acciones en el mercado de valores entre los compradores y vendedores. So going back over this, we hear the following terms. Hacerse público. In this case, is to go public. So offer corporate shares to the public market. Emitir is to issue. La oferta pública inicial is IPO, Initial Public Offering. La oferta pública inicial. Convertirse en is to become. Convertirse en. El propietario or la propietaria is owner. Owner. El propietario. Cumplir, you may know, means to attain or to fulfill or to achieve. Cumplir. Las metas operativas y financieras means operational and financial goals. So, la meta is goal. Las metas operativas y financieras. Sacar provecho de. To benefit from. Sacar provecho de. Ganar in this case means to earn, and you may understand it also means to win, and that is the verb ganar. El dividendo is dividend, like a dividend that a company pays to its shareholders. El dividendo. So let's go back to those 4 steps about how the stock market works. Una empresa decide hacerse pública. A company decides to go public y emitir acciones en la bolsa, and to issue shares in the stock market. So then again you see en la bolsa, in this case, refers to the general stock market. Hace una oferta pública inicial. To make an initial public offering or IPO. Número 2. Los inversionistas compran las acciones, investors buy the shares, y se convierten en propietarios de una parte de la empresa, and become owners of part of the company. Número 3. La empresa obtiene el capital, the company obtains capital, y podrá crecer y cumplir sus metas operativas y financieras, and can grow and achieve its operational and financial goals. Número 4. Los inversionistas podrán sacar provecho de las acciones de las siguientes maneras. The investors can benefit from the shares in the following ways. Ganar dividendos otorgados por la empresa by earning dividends paid by the company. Negociar las acciones en el mercado de valores entre compradores y vendedores. By negotiating shares in the securities market between buyers and sellers. Entonces, ¿por qué invertir en la bolsa? Si tienes dinero, ¿por qué lo invertirías en el mercado de valores? Pues la primera razón sería para rentabilizar tus ahorros, porque puede ser más rentable que dejar el dinero en el banco, aunque existe el riesgo de perderlo todo. La segunda sería para batir la inflación. Y en fin, la diversificación de tus ahorros. Este mercado está regido por la ley de la oferta y la demanda. Si hay muchos inversionistas que quieren comprar una acción y hay pocos vendedores, su valor subirá. Si hay muchos vendedores de esa acción, pero pocos compradores, su valor bajará. So why should we invest in the stock market? We just talked about it. Let's look at some of the vocabulary in that section. Rentabilizar is a verb that means to make profitable. Rentabilizar. Los ahorros are savings. Los ahorros. Batir is to beat or to beat out. It can also mean to beat as in to beat eggs, but in this case we're talking about overcoming la inflación, inflation. La inflación. La diversificación is just like it sounds. It means diversification. La diversificación. Regir is a verb that means to govern or lead or control. Regir. Subir is to go up, and bajar is to go down. So let's take a look at reasons to invest in the stock market. Rentabilizar ahorros. To make savings profitable. Puede ser más rentable que dejar dinero en el banco. It can be more profitable than leaving money in the bank. Aunque existe el riesgo de perderlo todo. Although there is a risk of losing it all. La segunda, the second is batir la inflación, to beat out inflation. And finally, la diversificación de ahorros, the diversification of savings. Diversify your savings. Este mercado está regido por la ley de la oferta y la demanda. This market is driven by the law of supply and demand. Si hay muchos inversionistas que quieren comprar una acción, if there are many investors who want to buy a stock, y hay pocos vendedores, su valor subirá. And there are few sellers, it will gain value. Its value will rise. Si hay muchos vendedores de esa acción, pero pocos compradores, su valor bajará. If there are many sellers of a stock, but few buyers, it will lose value. Finally, we're going to revisit my inspiration for this podcast episode, which is the New York Stock Exchange, la Bolsa de Valores de Nueva York. La Bolsa de Valores de Nueva York, conocida en inglés como New York Stock Exchange, NYSE, representa el mercado de valores más grande del mundo. Es el mercado de valores más grande del mundo, tanto en volumen monetario como en empresas cotizadas. En ella no solo cotizan los valores más importantes de Estados Unidos, sino también del mundo. So there are just a few new terms in this brief passage that I want to cover, and there's this word cotizar. Cotizar, cotizado. Cotizar, as you may know, means to quote, as in to bid, to give an estimate. However, in this case, it can mean to be listed as on a stock exchange. So cotizado is listed, and cotizar is to list securities. We also hear the term el volumen monetario, which means monetary volume, and it really references market capitalization, market value of the stocks. So let's go back and translate that brief passage. La Bolsa de Valores de Nueva York, conocida en inglés como New York Stock Exchange, NYSE, the New York Stock Exchange, representa el mercado de valores más grande del mundo, is the largest stock market in the world. Es el mercado de valores más grande del mundo, tanto en volumen monetario como en empresas cotizadas. It is the world's largest stock market, both in terms of monetary volume and listed companies. En ella no solo cotizan los valores más importantes de los Estados Unidos, sino también del mundo. The most important securities not only in the United States, but also in the world are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Bueno, mis queridos, eso es todo para el episodio de hoy. This is all for today's episode. I thank you for joining us and for being patient during the holiday months as I have worked on balancing the life of a mother, a professional, and a podcaster to get this episode out to you. So please don't forget to subscribe so you'll know when new episodes come out, and send us an email at BusinessSpanishPodcast@gmail.com and let us know what you think and what you'd like to hear. Until next time, hasta la próxima. Ciao!